So today we are watching the escape of the Nazis towards South America. So I have one thing to ask for you. Please hit the like and the subscribe, because especially with those videos, that would help me so much, because YouTube doesn't really like this content, doesn't want to push it out to so many people or demonetizes it for me. And yeah, that would be just amazing. Thank you so much for that. And if you want to see more of me, additional videos, for example, you can already watch my opinion about did Hitler die now in Berlin or in Argentina? Many of you asked me that. Then you can already check it out on my Patreon or my channel members. And, it will be way in advance, because in YouTube it comes maybe in 1 or 2 weeks. Thank you so much for that. And now let's go into it.
1961, a single trial was about to change the world's perspective on the most horrendous crime in human history.
What if I told you that after World War II, some of the most notorious Nazi war criminals didn't face justice?
Yeah.
Instead, they escaped to far-flung corners of the world, often with the help of religious institutions, governments, and intelligence agencies. This isn't some conspiracy theory. It's a historical fact.
Yeah, I was absolutely shocked when I heard, I think like 2 to 3 weeks ago, a podcast telling that like some Italian monks actually helped some of the Nazis over the Alps to then go to some ports in Italy to then go to South America. And I'm like, monks, you combined with monks mostly like purity and, being for freedom, being for peace. And then they do that. That is absolutely mind-blowing.
Rudolf Hess, you must plead guilty or not guilty.
Nein.
Today, we're diving into the story of the ratlines, the secret escape routes that allowed Nazis to slip through the cracks of post-war Europe and build new lives, often in South America. But how was this network exposed? And were there any heroes who fought against this web of complicity to bring these criminals to justice?
I came to Santiago to lead a campaign in order to obtain the deportation of the SS Colonel Walter Rauff.
By the end of this video...
What accent was this? I've heard in the beginning it is more like a French accent, but Walter Rauff was very well spoken, so was it a German accent?
You'll discover not only how this shadowy network operated, but also how brave individuals, often against great odds, worked to uncover the truth and bring the perpetrators to justice. Let's get started.
I'm Kenneth Cowell from Arizona. Okay, boys. Goddamn war's over. What do you got to say about this? This is the happiest day of my life. Wonderful, wonderful thing.
Picture Europe in 1945. The war is over, and the Allied forces are rounding up Nazi leaders, preparing them to face trial for war crimes. The Nuremberg trials are about to begin, and the world is ready to hold these men accountable for their horrific actions.
Nuremberg, Germany, once the shrine city of the Nazis, ravaged
Wow,
by the war.
look at how destroyed this is. Didn't know that Nuremberg was as destroyed as well. I knew, of course, about Dresden, but I didn't know that Nuremberg was that destroyed.
Hitler launched on the world, ironically the scene of the final chapter of his Partners in Conquest.
But not everyone is willing to face the consequences. Many high-ranking Nazis, especially those who knew they were guilty of atrocities like genocide, torture, and forced labor, realized they had two options: surrender and face likely execution, or disappear. And disappear they did. Using a network of covert escape routes that became known as ratlines, these war criminals evaded justice.
And new evidence shows that some surprising groups helped the Nazis and their collaborators escape to a life of freedom, either by mistake or by design.
But how exactly did this system work? And who made it possible? The success of the ratlines relied on a network of powerful figures across Europe and beyond. First, let's talk about Argentina. Under the leadership of President Juan Perón, Argentina became a key destination.
Lol, is this the sun that is on the or the sun? Sorry, the sun that is on the flag? It is, right?
Nazi fugitives.
Buenos Aires, nearly 2 million members of the pro-Perón General Labor Confederation stage a mammoth rally.
Perón.
By the way, with the other ones, I knew quite a lot about, I think. You always ask me how much do I know and how much did we learn in school. About this, we didn't learn really much, not because of some conspiracy theory, but you have to keep in mind that the main goal of German education here is to prevent that this ever happens again. And then, of course, to focus on what happened in Germany. So, of course, we focused a lot on what led up to the Nazis and then, of course, what happened in those 12 years. But after that, they are not really relevant anymore for the history of Germany. Then it's very relevant, East versus West, how to rebuild, how our currency gets going again, and of course the German economic wonder. But Nazis that just flee to Argentina, it's not very important to know how to be a good citizen and, about German history.
Rhone, Argentina became a key destination for Nazi fugitives.
Buenos Aires, nearly 2 million members of the pro-Perón General Labor Confederation stage a mammoth rally.
Perón, who admired European dictators like Hitler and Mussolini, saw an opportunity to attract skilled professionals and former military personnel from Europe to strengthen his own government and economy.
Please hit like and subscribe. It would help me so much. Thank you.
With Argentina's help, Nazis could disappear into the vast expanse of South America.
Do you have any memory of any other German families that had Nazi connections?
Y sí, había mucha gente alemana.
But Perón wasn't the only player in this game. The involvement of the Catholic Church and certain clergymen, particularly Bishop Alois Hudal, was critical. Hudal was an Austrian bishop stationed in Rome who sympathized with fascism. After the war, he used his position within the Vatican.
Wow, I always find Rome is so impressive. I was only there like for a few hours once, but you just go around one corner and there stands the most amazing building you have ever seen. And they say, yeah, that's our train station, basically. And you're like, what? So Rome is absolutely incredible.
Nazi war criminals with false documents, including passports and identification, helping them escape to South America.
The result was the spread of Nazis across Europe, North America, and South America, sometimes along with escaping Jews.
Hudal, along with other religious figures, justified their actions by claiming these men could be useful in the fight against communism, which was quickly becoming the West's new enemy. Perhaps most shockingly,
Pentagon.
American and British intelligence agencies also played a role in facilitating some of these escapes.
It's crazy how many parking spots there are, right? Around the Pentagon. Look at that, how many parking spots there are.
Perhaps most shockingly, American and British intelligence agencies also played a role in facilitating some of these escapes. As the Cold War began to take shape, the focus shifted from punishing war criminals to countering the Soviet Union.
Although Britain and Canada took around 8,000 Nazis in 1947, most made their way to Spain and the Americas.
For Western intelligence agencies, Nazis who had inside knowledge of Soviet military or political strategies were suddenly seen as valuable assets. This meant that some Nazis were actively recruited by Western governments in exchange for their expertise, effectively protecting them.
Yeah, we will also look at that in one of the next videos. I think Operation Paperclip is, I think, the name. We will certainly look also deeper into that.
Prosecution. One of the most infamous figures to benefit from these networks was Klaus Barbie, the Butcher of Lyon, who was responsible for the torture and murder of thousands in occupied France.
Okay.
I was naturalized on the 3rd of October 1957 in Bolivia under both names, Klaus Altmann and Klaus Barbie.
Klaus escaped Europe through the ratlines, living under the alias Klaus Altmann in Bolivia, where he thrived as a business.
Altmann means basically alt is old, and Mann, you probably guess, is man. So basically, Klaus Oldman.
For decades before being finally caught. So how did these Nazi criminals actually escape Europe? The process typically followed a few key steps, and the journey was perilous, but well organized. Most escapes started in Germany or Austria, where fleeing Nazis would travel south, often by foot through the Alps and into Italy. This was known as the monastery route, since many of the escapees hid in Catholic monasteries along the way.
Look at that, that looks very, very nice.
Using these religious sanctuaries as safe houses.
The ratlines extended across Europe, helping some of the most despicable war criminals of the Second World War escape into peace and obscurity in the years following 1945.
The involvement of religious institutions provided an extra layer of protection, and it was here that Bishop Hudal and others facilitated their next moves. Once they were in Italy, The Nazis would often make their way to Rome, where they were provided with forged documents, frequently Red Cross passports, or Vatican-issued identification.
That's the thing, you know, they actually escaped over the Red Cross somehow.
These papers were crucial, as they allowed the fugitives to blend in with displaced persons or refugees. With their new identities in hand, they could then board ships bound for South America. Argentina, Chile, and Brazil became the primary destinations.
The concentration camp commander and mass murderer Franz Stangl was escorted to the Vatican and personally met by Bishop Alois Karl Hudar, who saw Stangl off to Syria and eventually Brazil.
All countries with governments that at the time were either sympathetic to fascism or eager to accept skilled immigrants. Many of these Nazis settled into quiet lives, taking on new identities, and even achieving local prominence. For years they lived unbothered, far from the reach of the law.
Porque mi papá estaba en el centro y alrededor todo eran
all around
de Alemania. Todos los que vinieron de Alemania y se radicaron allá.
Ratlines remained largely secret for years, but slowly the truth began to come to light. Exposure.
Thankfully so, because you know, those guys should not get away with all of that, of course.
Of these escape routes is owed in large part to the dedication of Nazi hunters and investigative journalists, many of whom worked tirelessly, often at great personal risk, to track down these war criminals and bring them to justice. One of the most famous of these Nazi hunters was Simon Wiesenthal.
He is responsible for bringing to justice more than 1,100 war criminals around the world.
1,100, that is crazy. When you think about that, 1,100 days are more than 3 years. So he like literally brought one down probably when he served like 15 years every 5 days. That's absolutely amazing.
A Holocaust survivor who made it his life's mission to track down and expose Nazi war criminals.
Okay, so he served probably longer than 15 years for that.
Justice. Wiesenthal's meticulous research led to the capture of several key figures, including Adolf Eichmann, one of the chief architects of the Holocaust. Eichmann had escaped Argentina using the ratlines.
Okay, I thought he went to Brazil. Interesting. Okay.
False name for over a decade before being captured by Israeli Mossad agents in a daring operation in 1960. His capture and subsequent trial were a turning point in the global pursuit of justice for Nazi war criminals. Another key figure in exposing the ratlines was
Venice.
Klarsfeld.
The big tower is the which place is it? Marcus Place? I don't know anymore. Something with M, I think, in Venice. The very important thing here again is, sadly, I don't know much about those ratlines. I just heard of them recently, actually. Of course, there were always this, ha ha ha, you're a German from South America, so you need to be out of those jokes. But I didn't know much about this. And this is so interesting to learn all of that, to learn about the Catholic Church. Of course, I heard already this, but you know how deep this went. I didn't know. I think we cover again in another video the deep involvement of the Catholic Church. Tell me if you want to see that. And yeah, just amazing to learn all of that stuff.
A French-German journalist and activist who, alongside her husband Serge, dedicated herself to uncovering the fates of Nazi officials and collaborators.
And for this reason, I tried to mobilize.
Okay, so she has as well as a French accent as a German accent. That's very funny because I asked in the beginning if she's French or German, and she's both.
The opposition. I had already contacts with the leaders of the opposition, and they made statements in the sense that a man like Ralph has not to stay in Chile.
The Klarsfelds were instrumental in tracking down figures like Klaus Barbie, who had been living a comfortable life in Bolivia. Barbie was finally extradited to France in 1983, where he was tried and sentenced to life.
He was able to live over 30 years.
Life imprisonment for his crimes.
Klaus Barbie is hereby accused of having in 1943, in Lyon and elsewhere on French territory, committed crimes against humanity.
Hermann Langmann, an Austrian Holocaust survivor and historian, also played a significant role. His efforts focused on documenting Nazi atrocities and holding those responsible to account, even when governments and institutions preferred to look the other way. Langmann was a founding member of the...
Yeah, as I said in one of the earlier videos already, many Nazis were, maybe not in 83, you know, but in the 50s, in the early 60s, many Nazis were still in place. That had, of course, two reasons, because, you know, many said, you know, I had nothing to do, and there was like a little bit of a free ticket to not be charged, you know, and then they got out way too easily in Germany. So basically, in the end, everybody was not guilty. The second reason was, of course, also that there were not many men in Germany back in the day, because, you know, they fought the war. So, of course, many that were already older and were in charge of such positions also were back in charge, not because you necessarily needed them, but, of course, there was also not so much choice. But, of course, there were still enough people to maybe put other people into this position, of course. But it's also a small reason for it.
The Auschwitz Committee, which sought to keep the memory of the Holocaust alive and continue the fight for justice. As the ratlines were exposed, so too was the controversy surrounding the organizations and governments that had helped Nazi war criminals escape. The Catholic Church, and particularly the Vatican, has faced significant criticism for its role in aiding some of these men. While some church officials claimed that their actions were driven by a desire to protect anti-communists, others believe that it was a grave moral failure to help individuals who committed
I mean, you know, I get why communism is certainly not a good thing, right? But to then help Nazis or criminals that killed very many people escape, and I don't even see the connection, because they were not really in politics back in the day. They just said that they were regional famous. So just helping those Nazis doesn't really do something against communism, I would say, is a very bad excuse, in my opinion. And even if they really meant it that way, then they are certainly not the, I don't know, not really the smartest persons.
Atrocities.
The Vatican had a hand in sending thousands of Adolf Hitler's henchmen to a peaceful post-war life.
Similarly, the involvement of Western intelligence agencies has been a source of long-standing ethical debate. Was it justifiable to protect former Nazis?
Oh, that's the Holocaust memorial in the middle of Berlin. It's very, very interesting. That's very big stones. They get bigger the more you go in there. Then they are like 4 meters or 12 feet tall or something. I was there at night, and this is a very interesting feeling to go through there, because, you know, that is not something very scary, but still, it's a very interesting feeling. So if you're in Berlin, you should definitely check this out.
Potential value in the Cold War? Many argue that these actions undermine the very principles of justice that the Allies had fought to uphold during the war. The ratlines and the efforts to expose them have left a lasting mark on history. The sheer scale of complicity, from governments to religious institutions, shows just how difficult it can be to balance geopolitical interests with moral responsibility. However, the heroes of this story, people like Simon Wiesenthal and Beate Klarsfeld, remind us that even in the face of overwhelming odds, justice can still be pursued. The exposure of the ratlines also changed the way the world viewed post-war justice.
I think a lot of Canadians are reflecting on it right now. And in the meanwhile, those in Canada who did commit war crimes have something to think about too.
It underscored the importance of vigilance, not just in times of war, but in the aftermath when those responsible for crimes against humanity might otherwise escape. The story of the ratlines is a powerful reminder that history is not just a collection of events, but a complex web of actions and consequences. It teaches us about the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of individuals who stood up even when the odds are against them.
Thank you so much to Todd Phillips and all of the other patrons and channel members for your support. You're awesome.
If you found this...
Yeah, very good video. I hope you also liked my explanations. Tell me maybe in the comments, what videos should we check out next in the story? How did you like it? Maybe your own opinions about all of this. And I hope I see you in the next video. And if you want to see the Hitler if he escaped already to Argentina video already, then you can definitely check it out on my Patreon or my channel members. Until then, keep liking, subscribing, and bye.